Hello there. I am the Midnight Time Traveler, and today we're traveling to the wizarding world of Harry Potter. I know you may be using this video to fall asleep, so before that, make sure to like the video and subscribe. Also, where are you from, and what time are you watching? Would you live as a wizard? Now get comfortable, relax, and let's begin. I awaken to the steady hum of iron wheels gliding over jointed rail, and for a moment I sit still, feeling the subtle vibration of the Hogwarts Express beneath the soles of my shoes. While the compartment settles into morning hush, sunlight pours through beveled glass, scattering prisms that dance over stacks of trunks, cages, and cloak-draped shoulders. Though I remind myself not to use that forbidden punctuation and exchange it for a comma in my mind. I am sharing the narrow space with two first-year girls who whisper about sorting house rumors, a third-year Hufflepuff who has already dozed off with a herbology book open on his lap, and a restless tawny owl that pecks softly at its latch. Outside, the countryside rolls by in ribbons of green, yellow, and heather purple, each color sliding into the next as if the land were practicing a gentle transformation charm. I draw my journal from an inner pocket of the traveling cloak that Madame Malkin stitched for me, noting that wizard tailoring favors hidden folds so parchment and quill may remain uncrumpled even when squeezed between bobbing passengers. A tea trolley rattles down the corridor, and the witch behind it greets us with a smile that creases like warm pastry, offering pumpkin pasties, cauldron cakes, and a glimmering jar of fizzing whizbees that emit tiny sparks when the lid is lifted. One girl hesitates over a chocolate frog, worried it will leap away. So I demonstrate a discreet freezing charm, turning the confection still long enough for her to unwrap it without incident. The wizard card inside depicts Godric Gryffindor, whose animated portrait gives me a formidable thumbs up. No, a formidable thumbs up, before disappearing in search of another conversation. The soft chatter of students floats like birdsong, punctuated by louder exclamations when an older prankster wanders past, bragging that the caretaker's cat once ran from him in fear of a simple tickling hex. I tuck that anecdote into mental storage, suspecting it of exaggeration, then return my gaze to passing hills where sheep slow their chewing as the scarlet engine whistles by. Subtle enchantments prevent Muggle eyes from registering our existence. Yet one black-haired shepherd boy turns his head and frowns, as though feeling a vibration in magic-sensitive bones. And I wonder if some children of nan-magical families are born with faint attunement, precursors to letters that will arrive years later in thick cream envelopes. As morning slips toward midday, the train crosses a viaduct of broad gray arches, wind rushing through open windows and puffing the pages of my notes like sails. The scent is bracing, redolent of wet stone, peat smoke from distant cottages, and a faint sweetness that might be wild gorse in bloom. Inside the compartment, an impromptu lesson in spell pronunciation takes shape when a Ravenclaw prefect overhears my explanation of Latin stems. So she joins in, demonstrating how a sharp flick at the end of the word lumos yields a brighter flare than if one lets the wand linger mid-air. Again, I course correct, letting commas handle the pause. The Hufflepuff boy awakens, impressed, and admits he spent his summer holiday trying to ignite sparks with a snapped quill he found in his grandmother's attic. I reassure him that accidental magic often hides in plain frustration, appearing the moment confidence replaces self-doubt. Soon the conversation drifts to Quidditch, and the prefect details last year's inter-house final, where a Slytherin seeker executed a daring feint that sent a Gryffindor chaser barreling into the stands. My quill scratches swiftly, cataloging phrases, gestures, and the way her eyes gleam when recalling Ariel's strategy, evidence that wizard sport is equal parts athleticism and theater. Through the open door, I glimpse other students trading enchanted cards that depict famous potion masters, each portrait pausing mid-brew to wink or correct misprinted ingredient lists. And I consider how such dynamic media shape collective memory far more effectively than static Muggle textbooks. Noon approaches, signaled by the trolley witch's second circuit and by stomachs that rumble in chorus. So I purchase a pair of chicken and ham pies, whose flaky crust flakes onto my robe with intentional defiance of gravity, until a quick Scourgify sweeps crumbs away. The Hufflepuff boy offers his Bertie Bott's beans, so I select one that turns out to taste of buttered parsnip, unexpectedly pleasant, whereas he receives mushroom and spends the next minute gulping pumpkin juice to mask earthy notes. Laughter circles the compartment and settles into companionable quiet, the sort that bonds travelers before names are fully learned. Finally, the locomotive gives a gentle jolt, pace slowing, and a hush rolls backward through carriages. We have crossed the perimeter where ancient wards dim the roar of metal against rail and replace it with something softer, almost reverent, as though the very air anticipates our arrival at the hidden heart of magical Britain. The afternoon sky has deepened to tarnished silver by the time Hogsmeade Station slides into view, its slate roof peppered with white gulls that cry over the hiss of breaking steam. Lanterns flicker awake in anticipation of dusk, casting golden halos on puddles left by an earlier shower, and students spill onto the platform with a mixture of excitement and practiced nonchalance. I step down carefully, feeling the abrupt contrast between the warm carriage and cool Highland breeze that threads through my hair with curious fingers. Nearby, the half-giant gamekeeper calls for first years, his voice booming yet kind, and tiny figures in oversized scarves cluster around him as though he were a walking hearth. Older students, myself included, veer toward horseless carriages that stand ready, their doors opening with courtly precision. The sensation of movement without visible steeds remains uncanny even after repeated exposure. Wheels churn over gravel, yet no creature can be seen save for fleeting impressions of skeletal wings if one knows where to look. Through the carriage windows, the black lake emerges, dark as polished obsidian and perfectly still until ripples appear from below, revealing the tentacle of the resident giant squid giving an amiable salute. Beyond the lake, the castle rises in stages of sandstone and granite, turrets crowned with banners that snap in a wind scented lightly with bog myrtle and burnt oak, remnants of distant fireplaces. My companions converse about elective course selections, debating whether arithmancy's calculations outweigh the danger of attending care of magical creatures, where a misjudged hippogriff bow can bruise both ego and ribcage. I listen, absorbing their priorities. Some weigh future ministry careers. Others chase Quidditch glory, yet all share awe that their education will unfold inside walls older than many Muggle nations. Our carriage passes the gamekeeper's hut, sheltered at the edge of the forest, its pumpkins swelling bigger than cauldrons as they absorb subtle fertilizing charms woven into moonlight. We roll beneath an archway where winged boar statues guard the entrance, tusks gleaming under an unbreakable glaze, and the castle seems to breathe, windows exhaling candle warmth that beckons like a welcome after long absence. When the carriage stops, we step onto worn flagstones that hum faintly, a signature resonance of protective spells layered through centuries by generations of grounded yet visionary witches and wizards. Crossing the entrance hall, I pause beneath chandeliers whose crystal drops refract torchlight into constellations across vaulted ceilings, then merge with the real constellations depicted by star charts upstairs. The clamor of arriving students bounces off marble pillars, yet everything hushes the instant the great hall doors sweep aside. I follow the flow inside and instantly feel smaller beneath the enchanted ceiling that mirrors twilight, dotted with emerging stars, each flicker timed precisely with celestial reality. 4 house tables stretch from end to end, surfaces polished so thoroughly that inverted candles appear to float below as well as above. Before the sorting begins, I slip into a seat designated for transfer scholars at the staff end of the Ravenclaw table, affording a panoramic vantage of the entire ceremony. The headmaster, eyes twinkling like planets in slow orbit, welcomes everyone with remarks that blend subtle warnings, inspiring challenges, and a brief joke about a boat truckle who kept pickpocketing spare wands in the greenhouse. Then comes the sorting hat, placed on a 3-legged stool, brim yawning like a theater curtain as it launches into verse. I note its lyrics this year emphasize collaboration in the face of creeping complacency, hinting at tensions unknown to Muggle historians. And I wonder whether the hat possesses prophetic abilities or merely remarkable insight from listening to adolescent anxieties year after year. One by one, names are read aloud, nervous feet pad across ancient floorboards, and the brief hush before each verdict holds more electricity than a thunderstorm. Cheers erupt, scarves wave, and by the time the final first year joins her table, the hall is a living tapestry of color and optimism. Food materializes, silver platters blossoming into roasts, steaming potatoes, platters of salmon flecked with dill, and green beans charmed to squeak a tiny tune if left untouched for too long. I help myself to modest portions, intent on sampling rather than feasting, and I detect aromatic patterns, cloves in the pumpkin soup, nutmeg in treacle tart, and a curious fizz in the elderflower cordial that produces tiny dragon-shaped bubbles that burst into fragrance instead of flame. Around me, conversations layer like orchestral movements. To my left, a 6th year debates wand theory, insisting that phoenix feather cores promote ethical decision-making, while to my right, to 2nd years gossip about secret passageways behind the tapestry of Barnabas the Barmy. I tease apart threads of rumor, wonder, and ritual, weaving them into notes for later reflection on how shared myth sustains institutional identity. At last, desert fades like a dream, and we rise in a tide of robes, following prefects up staircases that pivot lazily into new orientations. Stone steps, grinding like friendly giants, shifting weight. Portraits applaud or scold, depending on their disposition, some offering directions, while others feign ignorance for mischief. I lag slightly, admiring how magic saturates everyday infrastructure. Torches relight themselves when drafts snuff their flames. Suits of armor nod as we pass, and the air smells faintly of lemon polish and old parchment, a fragrance as distinct to Hogwarts as sea salt is to coastal towns. Reaching the Ravenclaw common room, I face the door knocker shaped like an eagle that demands a riddle before entry. Tonight, it asks, what flares brighter, knowledge or imagination? I pause, then answer that each feeds the other until distinction blurs into shared brilliance, and the door swings wide in approval. Inside, a dome of midnight blue arches overhead, enchanted to reveal trajectories of planets in real time, and cushioned chairs gather near a fire that crackles with logs charmed never to reduce to ash. I examine shelves filled with reference volumes, many handwritten, their spines labeled in copperplate script that glints when candles flicker. Prefects distribute timetables, cautioning that staircase number 12 refuses to appear before breakfast on Thursdays, and reminding first years that lending their notes to Peeves, the poltergeist, almost guarantees their homework will vanish, replaced by limericks of questionable taste. I climb a spiral staircase to a turret room where 4 posters encircle an antique table etched with runic graffiti by generations of restless students. My trunk glides to the foot of a bed and unclasps, content to unpack itself under a gentle sorting charm. Moonlight splashes across stone walls, and the silhouette of an owl pauses at the window ledge, head swiveling like a small scholar seeking conversation. I offer it a polite nod, then sit at the desk to ink final observations. Today, I write, proved that nothing in the wizarding world is mundane, for even silence carries hidden incantations, and every routine gesture exists within a tapestry of enchantment older than memory. My quill falls still, candlelight dwindles, and I pull hangings shut, cocooned in crimson and gold fabric that mutes the distant laughter echoing from common rooms below. Sleep descends slowly, thick as velvet, carrying with it faint strains of the Hogwarts night chorus, rustling pages, glowing embers, and the steady breathing of young minds already dreaming of levitation, transformation, and mysteries waiting beyond tomorrow's dawn. Morning slips into the tower like a polite visitor, brushing frost from the beveled windows before the first chime of the castle clock. I push back the heavy curtains of my 4-poster and sit for a moment while the room adjusts its palette, stone walls deepening from muted blue to gentle lilac. A faint scent of parchment and lavender drifts upward from the nearby desks, where quills still glisten with yesterday's ink. My roommates whisper about dream images of broom races that soared through clouds shaped like puffskeins, and one yawns an apology when his enchanted alarm finches, placed at his bedside, begin a madrigal 20 seconds early. I dress in clean robes, careful to note that the lining bears even stitches that shimmer faintly, a tiny ward said to repel minor hexes, and then step into a spiral staircase whose steps present supportive hums as each foot lands. The Ravenclaw common room has an air of subdued celebration at sunrise, made bright by a ceiling charmed to reveal meteor showers, ignored by most astronomers below. I pause at the Eagle Knocker, answer a query about the difference between truth and belief, then follow the flow of students down corridors that still creak from thermal spells warming stone. The great hall greets us with the warm scent of cinnamon, toast, and sizzling sausage. Floating candles glow like honey drops suspended in still air, and the enchanted ceiling shows a pale sweep of dawn clouds edging into gold. I help myself to kippers and a small cauldron-shaped teapot that pours precisely 2 cups at a time, never spilling. A Hufflepuff 4th year introduces me to a new fruit spread concocted by the house elves that tastes of blackcurrant and mild pepper, a pairing that piques the palate in delightful ripples of heat. After breakfast, we assemble outside the Charms classroom, where Professor Flitwick's door bears a neatly chalked timetable. He greets each student by name, voice cheerful as a bell, and ushers us to desks arranged in precise arcs for optimum acoustic resonance. Today's lesson concerns the featherlight charm, an incantation that can reduce the apparent weight of any object by a desired fraction. The professor demonstrates with a full suit of armor borrowed from the corridor, rendering it light enough to balance on his fingertip like a paper fan. He explains the physics behind magical mass reduction, drawing glyphs that glow mid-air while he speaks, then invites volunteers. I partner with a Slytherin who carries a marble mortar in her bag for potions practice. Together we test different wand motions, discovering that a slight counterclockwise swirl adds 10% extra lift, information that earns an approving squeak from the professor. Midday brings a brisk walk across the courtyard toward Greenhouse 3, where Professor Sprout waits among planters shaped like oversized teacups. The air here is muggy with herbal fragrance, a mixture of damp earth, mint, and something sharp that reminds me of pickled radish. Our subject is the flutterbee bush, a shrub whose leaves hum a lullaby when shaken. Sprout tasks us with transplanting saplings to enchanted pots that amplify their song, an effort to soothe nervous boat trackles kept in a crate nearby. While my gloved hands loosen soil, I ask the professor how these bushes evolved symbiotic melody, and she laughs, explaining that magical horticulture often selects for emotional resonance rather than beauty alone. A sudden shriek rings out when a beetle the size of a walnut tries to nest in a student's hair, but Sprout flicks a gentle banishing charm, and the creature lands in a bucket with a thud, no harm done. Evening drapes itself across the castle in velvet layers of indigo and rose as we make our way to the library for study hour. Chandeliers dim automatically to protect ancient inks, leaving orbs of soft light flitting like tame will-o'-the-wisps between shelves. I settle at a wooden table whose surface bears centuries of discreet carvings, none of which dare appear vulgar under the strict eyes of Madame Pants. Research tonight focuses on early goblin minting methods for a history of magic essay, and I lose myself in tomes that detail exchange rates pegged to dragon heartstring supplies. Occasionally, I jot personal observations, such as how quills dipped in sepia ink emit a faint vanilla scent when words flow smoothly. Shortly before curfew, a quiet commotion rises near the restricted section, where a stack of self-shelving books begins levitating in a slow spiral dance. Madame Pants hurries over, brandishing a feather duster with surprising authority, and the books settle down, pages fluttering sheepishly. Dinner arrives with orchestral flourish as platters appear across the tables, and the great hall thrums like a happy beehive. Roast lamb rests beside bowls of minted peas that occasionally clink their porcelain in polite applause, while a tureen of leek soup exhales steam shaped like question marks that vanish when stirred. I help myself to a modest plate, documenting flavors while eavesdropping on lively debates about whether Polyjuice Potion can replicate a dimple. Nearby, a Gryffindor 5th year practices silent spellcasting by levitating her fork, though each wobble releases a single green spark that lands in her pumpkin juice with a hiss. The headmaster rises briefly to welcome visiting historians from Boakes Battens, and I note the subtle way his speech spells create pockets of silence, so every word lands without echo. Dessert follows soon, treacle tart infused with candied ginger, a pairing that pricks the tongue and settles into warmth like grateful sunlight. After dinner, I wander toward the Quidditch pitch, where practice rings with energy under fast-gathering dusk. The Ravenclaw team runs passing drills, blue robes fluttering like flags in a loyal breeze. Beaters swoop with controlled aggression, their bats delivering crisp pops that send bludgers ricocheting off padded goal hoops. I sit on wooden stands that hum faintly from protective charms woven to absorb stray impacts, and jot biomechanics of mid-air turns, noting that a loose ankle at speed invites broom drift, a detail coaches seldom teach first years. The captain notices my scribbling, calls a break, and asks if I study sports journalism. I answered truthfully that I collect cultural artifacts, earning a puzzled grin before she remounts, counting beneath her breath as if each beat controls gravity. Practice ends with a celebratory corkscrew dive, and when the seeker lands, he presents the evening's final snitch, wings slowing, then folds it into a breast pocket like a silver bookmark. Leaving the pitch, I return through upper corridors, shimmering with torchlight, only to encounter Peeves, the poltergeist, drifting upside down, humming a tune suspiciously close to the school anthem, though every other word has been replaced by raspberry noises. He spots me, salutes with exaggerated flourish, and drops a handful of ink bladders that burst mid-air into harmless navy clouds, smelling faintly of blueberries. Students scatter, but I remain still, curious whether he reacts to lack of fear. Peeves circles, eyes gleaming like mischievous marbles, then comments that my robes lack the usual house crest. I reply that curiosity sometimes travels incognito, which seems to delight him. With a theatrical bow, he zips off, leaving letters floating that rearrange to spell "Do mind the stairs," truly kind in an impish way. The warning proves timely. Moments later, a moving staircase slides into a new alignment, steps grinding like polite giants, clearing throats before settling. Drawn by cool autumn air, I climb toward the owlery, a cylindrical tower open to the sky where hundreds of owls roost on tiered perches. Guano scent mingles with fresh hay and crisp pine carried from distant forests, an aromatic combination that would confound any perfumer. Moonlight filters through arched windows, painting bars of silver across restless wings. I deliver a test letter addressed to myself in the future, sealing it with blue wax stamped by a borrowed raven emblem. My owl, a speckled creature with amber eyes, lands softly, accepts the scroll, then ruffles feathers, awaiting coordinates that do not yet exist. I whisper that the journey is symbolic, and she blinks in mutual understanding before lifting into night currents. For a moment, silence reigns, except for gentle hoots and the whisper of beating wings, a living metronome marking time far older than clocks or calendars carved by human hands. At midnight, astronomy class convenes on the highest tower, platforms outlined with lattice of brass that focus starlight through crystal lenses. Professor Sinistra gestures toward Draco, discussing stellar drift and its magical implications on long-distance apparition accuracy. Students huddle in cloaks while telescopes adjust themselves, gears ticking like friendly insects. I record spectral hues of Betelgeuse, noting subtle shifts from the Mughal spectrum charts, suggesting that magic refracts color differently in upper atmospheres. A Slytherin pair whispers about mapping coordinates for their secret broom tour next summer, but the professor warns them that misguided trust in constellations alone can deliver one into Kraken territory near the Faroe Islands. Dry humor twinkles in her gaze, as she reminds everyone gravity shows neither favoritism nor mercy. Class concludes with a ritual salutation, wands lifted to catch meteoric dust that sparkles briefly on polished wood before fading into faint perfume reminiscent of rain on chalk. The descent from the tower leads back through dim corridors where portraits doze, frames emitting soft snores that echo like distant flutes. At the Ravenclaw door, the knocker demands philosophical reflection, asking, does time create knowledge, or does knowledge create time? I propose that knowledge curates memory, and memory defines perceived duration, and the door clicks open, apparently satisfied or simply amused by semantics at midnight. Inside, common room embers glow low, casting silhouettes of armchairs shaped like open books. A few night owls shuffle parchment while sipping steaming chocolate spiced with cardamom. I join them, exchanging theories about the ethics of memory modification. One student suggests amnesia charms could treat trauma. Another counters that pain shapes growth. Conversation drifts to laughter when someone recalls a failed potion brewing attempt that dyed eyebrows teal for a week. Laughter fades gently, replaced by page-turning, a comforting rustle that feels as vital to scholarship as fresh ink. Later, wandering to clear my mind, I encounter the gray lady gliding along a deserted gallery lined with dusty armor. Her translucent form captures candlelight, scattering it into pale rainbows that follow like loyal fireflies. I greet her courteously, and she pauses, voice a quiet bell in still air, asking why I wander so late without map or memory charm. I explain my mission of observation, and she nods, remarking that living minds often forget what castles remember. She gestures toward a niche where an old suit of armor bears a dent shaped like a dragon talon, then shares that, during the Welsh Green Panic of 1743, a student had hidden inside it, only to faint from heat moments later. Dry humor touches her lips when she notes no one has polished that dent, a reminder that heroic moments rarely receive housekeeping attention. She fades through stone, leaving scents of lilac and distant ocean breeze. Shortly before curfew, I misjudge staircase timings and end up on a landing unfamiliar even to castle schematics. Walls curve in odd perspective, decorated with mosaics depicting wand handles arranged like constellations. An alcove houses a mirror so tarnished it reflects only silhouettes cloaked in silver fog. As I approach, a hidden hinge squeaks open to reveal a shortcut descending directly behind the kitchens. Two house elves appear, aprons crisp, eyes bright as wet emeralds, and invite me to sample new fudge experiments. I taste a cube laced with clover honey. Sweetness blooms gentle, then lifts into airy mint that clears lingering fatigue. They beam with pride when I remark the flavor balance, and one wraps to pieces in parchment for future study, insisting good ideas deserve midnight reinforcement. I bow gratitude, then follow another corridor that rises like a lazy serpent until I finally spot familiar murals near the library corridor, a welcome signpost. Curiosity tugs again, and I slip through a narrow arch where two stone badgers stand guard, discovering a small circular chamber lined with shelves of crystal vials, each swirling with silvery vapor. A pensieve stands in the center, its rim engraved by runes older than common script. I consider protocol, then decide to sample a single memory, labeled simply the first snowball fight, trusting benign intent. The cool surface draws me inward, and I am swept into a courtyard scene where students in 17th century attire lob enchanted snow that sprinkles laughing sparks upon impact. A young witch levitates 3 spheres at once, her technique impeccable, and nearby a portrait of a knight cheers every successful strike. The memory dissipates quickly, leaving me standing again in the chamber, cheeks tingling as though snow truly melted there. I replace the vial exactly, heart lightened by glimpse of timeless mischief, then exit quietly, sealing archway with a whispered finite. Back in my dormitory, I sit at the desk, parchment spread like horizon under warm lamplight. I catalog the day's discoveries, from featherlight equations to starlight perfumery, adding reflections on intangible culture such as the kindness of house elves and the impudent generosity of Peeves. Words flow until candle stub burns low, its flame shrinking to ember blush. Outside the tower windows the night sky shines clear, constellations steady, as if pleased that students below track their ancient paths with respectful awe. I extinguish the candle, close curtains, and slide under blankets that hold faint trace of cedar and lavender. Thoughts drift like lazy thestrals in warm updrafts, carrying me toward sleep, while castle heartbeats pulse in distant plumbing and crackling fires. Just before consciousness slips away, I sense the soft impact of owl wings on the sill, perhaps bringing a letter from tomorrow, a quiet promise that adventure resumes with dawn. Sleep arrives, then slips away when an unfamiliar chime ripples through the dormitory. At first, I assume it is the clock reaching a polite hour, yet the tone lingers like the resonance of a glass tapped by a silver spoon. I pull on slippers, step into the corridor, and see faint teal light seeping beneath an unused attic door. Senses sharpen, curiosity stronger than caution. I ease the door wide enough to slide inside and discover a narrow garret filled with clocks of every possible persuasion. Hourglasses spin within crystal cages, cuckoos flit in and out without warning, and a grandfather clock taller than a troll studies me with a dial shaped like a contemplative owl. In the center floats a single pocket watch, hands whirling anti-clockwise, casting that teal glow which pulses in time with my heart. When I reach forward, the air thickens, as if time itself pushes back, warning that secrets inside this attic prefer their privacy. Professor Vector, whose classroom is 2 floors down, suddenly appears behind me, wearing a robe embroidered with constellations sketched in silver thread. She explains that this garret contains temporal artifacts confiscated from students over centuries, each object too unpredictable for the main archives. Her voice is calm yet firm, like water over marble, and she ushers me toward the staircase after resetting protective wards that hum into place again. On our descent, she shares a story of a mischievous 5th year who once tried to build a time-reversing metronome for an essay extension. The device nearly trapped him in a loop of perpetual Tuesday mornings, saved only by the intervention of 3 professors and a very annoyed portrait of a 17th century clockmaker. The anecdote ends with Vector smiling faintly and advising that observation is valuable, yet distance from unstable artifacts is sometimes wisdom. I thank her, and she vanishes at the next landing like a polite equation solved to its simplest form. Back in the dormitory, I finally surrender to rest. Dreams arrive, vivid, colored by the day's experiences, yet one stands apart. I find myself walking beside the lake, under starlight, when the water's surface splits. Without a ripple, and a galleon rises silently, sails filled with moonlight rather than wind. Figures move upon its deck, outlines of witches and wizards dressed in robes that flutter as though beneath invisible waves. They carry lanterns that glow with memories rather than flame, each scene flickering across the fabric of the night. One lantern shows a future Quidditch final, another displays an old potions lesson where cauldrons bloom with chrysanthemums. A tall woman offers me a lantern shaped like a spiral shell, whispering that every observer eventually adds a strand to the tapestry of time. I reach to accept, yet wake before contact. My chest feels lighter, as though part of the dream still floats above the blankets, slowly dissolving into dawn light. Real morning arrives, with scatterings of pink along the horizon, and the aroma of fresh bread rising through stone floors. I stretch, legs tingling, then notice a parchment square resting on my bedside table, sealed by a pressed knotgrass leaf. The note is unsigned, its ink soft jade, and it simply states, "Curiosity rewards, impatience punishes, the attic remembers." No name, no flourish, yet I feel a gentle amusement behind the words. I file the slip into my journal, mark the time, then prepare for breakfast, deciding to keep the attic discovery between my quill and the moon for now. Down in the great hall, I savor oat porridge, topped with cloudberry jam, each spoonful bright with tart sweetness that wakes every taste bud nearby. Two Gryffindors discuss an upcoming herbology quiz, one revising Latin names with the rhythm of a sea shanty, the other counting on luck and Professor Sprout's forgiving grading curve. Their banter provides pleasant background music while I compose fresh observations. Lessons resume with defense against the dark arts, a subject always poised between cautionary tale and thrilling spectacle. The new professor, a former curse-breaker with scars that glow faintly whenever chalk scrapes board, introduces nonverbal shielding techniques. He invites volunteers to attempt a silent protego while he lobs soft cushions as projectiles. I step forward, wand ready, mind replaying notes on breath control from Charms class. The cushion arcs, time seems to dilate. I whisper intent rather than words, and a translucent barrier materializes, feathering the cushion to the floor like a docile owl landing on moss. Applause ripples through the room, warm but brief, soon followed by the professor's reminder that real curses do not respect theatrical timing. He awards 5 points, then scribbles a homework assignment requiring analysis of personal weakness that might disrupt focus. I jot that curiosity can distract, yet also inspire, a dual-edged trait worthy of study as day 2 wins to its final quiet hour. Lunch follows the demanding lesson, and it arrives like a gentle reward. The great hall, shimmering with midday brightness that pours through tall windows and slides across goblets in liquid ribbons of gold. I share a bench with 2 second years who animatedly rank every known variation of pumpkin pasty according to flakiness, sweetness, and reheating potential. They invite me to judge, so I taste one slice that crumbles perfectly and another that melts at first bite like warm sunset. I remark that culinary charms likely sustain crust texture, and their eyes widen as though I have offered treasure. Across the room, the visiting Bokspattens historians discuss parchment conservation, while a nearby ghost passes through their table, swirling quills into midair for a moment of mild chaos. Laughter follows, lightly spiced with awe. Then everyone resumes chewing, quills settling like docile birds on pristine parchment. Potions, after lunch, promises a cool respite in the dungeons. Yet today, Professor Slughorn has arranged for something decidedly lively. A practical on the creation of soothing elixirs for enchanted creatures. Cauldrons line the benches, flames murmuring beneath copper bellies, while shelves display jars of twinkling petals and vials of sleep dust that shimmer like powdered moonlight. My partner, the ever-focus-minded Slytherin from Charms, selects ingredients with surgeon precision, her commentary concise yet filled with subtle wit. We grind valerian root, fold in sprigs of night jasmine, and the brew shifts from jade to milky pearl. Slughorn patrols like a genial gardener, praising thick textures and gentle aromas, cautioning against overstirring lest the potion froth into chaos. At one station, a Gryffindor team forgets this warning, and their cauldron erupts soft bubbles that drift upward, crooning lullabies. promptly putting 2 observers to sleep against cool stone. Late afternoon finds our class herding toward the paddock south of the greenhouses, where care of magical creatures meets today under a sky the color of new slate. Professor Kettleburn, his coat patched with scorch marks and claw scratches from unknown escapades, introduces a family of miniature dragons called noble drakes, whose scales reflect inner moods in shifting pastels. He demonstrates calm handling by offering a palmful of mint leaves, explaining that fresh mint, not gold, is their favorite indulgence, a fact that upends several legendary tales of dragon greed. Students form a half circle, each receiving dragon-hide gloves stitched by ancient runic pattern, and approach with measured respect. My own noble drake, barely the length of my forearm, settles with a contented trill when I stroke between its wings, scales flickering from pale lavender to soft teal. Kettleburn notes, I have what he calls settled heart rhythm, a useful trait among flame-prone companions. Evening study hour is replaced tonight by an elective workshop on magical instrumentation in a small tower room normally reserved for Ravenclaw chess tournaments. Professor Babbling arrives wheeling a trolley laden with crystalline ories, tuning forks engraved with runes, and glass spheres that hum at near inaudible frequencies. The goal, she says, is to understand resonance between spell, intent, and material housing. We pair off and experiment with wand strokes near each device, observing how intention modulates pitch and luminescence. I discover that a deliberate whisper can coax a glass sphere into refracting light into tight spirals, while a careless flick cracks the same sphere, releasing a sigh that smells faintly of eucalyptus. Babbling encourages failure as long as notes are taken, stating that discovery often hides behind embarrassment. By session end, the room glows with soft, prismatic haze, and every participant leaves clutching fresh insight greater than any single incantation. Night drapes the castle in serene quiet, punctuated by a few distant hoots from the owlery and the soft shush of portraits wishing one another pleasant dreams. I retreat to the common room balcony that overlooks the courtyard, quill poised above parchment. Reflecting on the day, I record how temporal curiosities continue to tug at my thoughts, and how the attic warning feels less ominous and more like an invitation to learn patience. I describe noble drake pastel scales and the perfume of mint on dragon breath, the chorus of snores in potions class, and the prism-filled tower that still tingles in my fingertips. My notes close with a whisper of gratitude, for the castle pulses with history, yet welcomes the curious as long as they listen. Candles gutter low, so I slip to bed, blankets warm, mind weaving memories into dreams, confident that tomorrow will reveal another layer of wonder waiting just beyond sunrise. Back inside the spiral corridor, I find the common room nearly empty. Only 2 candles flicker near windows that reflect a sky turning deeper sapphire. The eagle knocker has apparently decided to test late wanderers by posing riddles every 15 minutes, its voice echoing slightly like metal touched by distant thunder. It greets me with a new query, asking, what is the single thread that binds the beginning and the end, yet never tangles? I ponder while listening to the faint hum of distant suits of armor polishing themselves. After several breaths, I answer, memory. The door opens without complaint, and I feel a subtle warmth of approval brush my collar. Inside, parchment scrolls lie stacked where earlier scholars studied, but a soft clink draws my attention toward a side table where a tiny hourglass rotates in steady rhythm, grains of sand glowing silver instead of gold. counting something that feels like possibility rather than seconds. My stomach reminds me that the afternoon Nobledrake session burned through earlier sustenance, so I follow faint aromas of nutmeg and vanilla down to the service corridor that leads toward the kitchen. Tapestries hide the entrance, and a tickle behind one ear prompts me to scratch the image of a fruit bowl exactly where the pear appears, which giggles, then swings open as a door. The kitchen bustles in peaceful harmony, dozens of house elves performing culinary ballet, wooden spoons stirring on their own, copper pans floating from shelf to enchanted sink. One elf offers me a tray of warm honey cakes, drizzled with apple blossom syrup and topped with flakes of crystallized rosemary. The combination surprises the palate, sweet with a whisper of forest. I offer thanks, and the elf beams, ears lifting like sails catching complimentary breezes. We chat about experimentation, and she proudly explains how she charmed sugar crystals to dissolve slower, allowing flavors to unfold in elegant stages. With fresh honey cakes wrapped in linen, I step outside onto the nearby courtyard, drawn by a quick burst of cool air, scented faintly with rain-soaked ivy. Clouds part just long enough for the annual Perseid shower to streak overhead, each meteor carving a silent hush across the firmament. A small cluster of students and one professor stand at the parapet, notebooks open to catch inspiration. Someone murmurs the legend that ancient astronomers believed falling stars were dragons briefly shedding scales of molten iron. I record the tale, imagining Nobledrake kin shedding pastel sparks in some hidden valley. A first year asks me quietly whether wishes truly lodge inside stardust. I answer that wishes become real when intention finds a path, and sometimes that path catches a ride on starlight because it prefers to travel fast. The notion delights her enough that she tucks it into her notebook as guiding wisdom. Returning through the North Gallery, I pause beside the portrait of Seraphina Quill, a formidable former librarian whose painted quill continues to annotate imaginary margins around her frame. She beckons, addressing me by title she invents on the spot, resident observer at large, curious. I lean closer, and she begins to lecture on misfiled knowledge, explaining that wisdom often slips between catalog cards because categories cannot keep pace with lived experience. She challenges me to find one forgotten shelf in the vast library tomorrow and rescue the loneliest book. Her eyes, pigment and varnish though they are, glint with gentle mischief. I promise, and she rewards me with a reference to Corridor 7, Row 3, a location I recognize as seldom visited. Before I can thank her, she returns to her parchment, jotting margins that rearrange themselves into a pattern resembling constellations, perhaps a secret index disguised as art. Hours edge past midnight when I decide loosening muscles will help sleep. So I visit the prefect bathroom, password acquired from an earlier conversation about soap sculptures. Marble pillars rise like pale trees, and the great pool shimmers with water infused by drops of something iridescent that smells of crushed mint and orchid. I lower in tension, melting as warmth spreads through limbs. The murals along the walls animate slow seaside scenes, gentle waves rolling beneath gulls that circle yet never cry. At one end, an array of taps release scents of cedar, citrus, and one that smells distinctly of parchment, newly unrolled. One chews the latter. Foam gathers in shapes of unfurling scrolls that dissolve before touch. Floating there, I recall the attic pocket watch, spinning anti-clockwise, and wonder if soaking in enchanted water slows or hastens internal clocks. Then realize curiosity can wait until dry robes and proper instrumentation. Steam drifts off shoulders as I dress once more, and the corridor near the bathroom feels elongated, as though the castle stretches in a quiet yawn. I notice faint whispers from the floorboards, not words, but tones, like the resonance of deep cello strings. Musical notes produced by minor thermal changes in the ancient timbers. Pausing, I place palm flat against wood and feel vibrations mapping some forgotten lullaby. It occurs to me that castles, like seashells, carry their own ocean of stories, audible only to ears patient enough to wait between echoes. I hum along gently, matching pitch, and the tones adjust, weaving harmony around mine. For several heartbeats, the hall becomes duet between stone memory and present breath. When silence returns, I sense a hush of gratitude, or perhaps I imagine it, yet the boards beneath my feet feel steadier on my subsequent steps. Upon reaching my dorm, I discover an owl perched inside the window alcove, copper feathers brushed by moonlight into coins of soft fire. The creature extends a leg bearing a ribbon rather than scroll. The ribbon woven from silver thread and strands of something dark teal, identical in hue to attic glow. No message, no seal, yet its fabric pulses faintly at my touch. The owl tilts its head, watching as I trace patterns along the weave. Suddenly letters bloom across fabric, one after another, spelling observe, do not adjust. The phrase fades just as quickly, leaving ribbon plain and silent. The owl departs without further ceremony, wings slicing air in noiseless arcs. I tie the ribbon round my notebook binding, deciding symbolism may reveal itself later. The way moonlit puzzles often bloom at dawn, when minds clear like glass, cooled from forge heat. The common room is darker now. Only embers within the hearth remain, glowing like distant constellations scattered upon black velvet. I settle into the high-backed chair nearest the window, parchment on lap, quill lowering into ink that catches ember light with copper glints. I compose observations, the living music of corridors, hidden librarians in paint, noble drake breath sweet with mint, meteor wishes, and the elegant engineering of honeycakes. I reflect on pace, how the wizard world bends time softly, sometimes quick as spellfire, sometimes slow as ivy climbing a battlement. My notes end with question marks regarding the attic and its guardian clocks, then an affirmation that curiosity paired with patience might be the safest route through labyrinths of enchanted chronology. Ink dries, a final sparkle fading to deep brown. Candle stub dwindles, yet mind remains awake, enough to review tomorrow's timetable propped against the lamplight. Arithmancy in first block, breakfast second, because calculations on empty stomach upset circuits of logic. Then an extracurricular meeting of the Time Turner Rehabilitation Society, a group dedicated to responsible discourse on temporal magic. I mark the appointment with interest, suspecting Professor Vector's subtle invitation. Beyond coursework, I plan to visit Corridor 7, Row 32, search for Seraphine's lonely volume, and perhaps drop by Greenhouse 2 to ask Sprout if Nobledrake droppings benefit Flutterby bushes. Planning steadies the heart, drawing stray worries into ordered lines, like stars charted into familiar constellations. When lists complete, I extinguish flame, the sudden darkness, soft, not oppressive, because the castle's breathing fills spaces where light once danced, offering gentle suggestion that rest is also part of exploration. blankets welcome with residual warmth, scent of cedar lingering from bath oils. Outside the window, early autumn winds sigh through turrets, shaping night air into murmured promises of fresh discovery. I close eyes, letting last sensations drift faint sugar on tongue, distant owl wingbeat, marble floor, still radiating bath heat through souls of memory. Thoughts spiral slower, turning from analysis to dreamy montage. Pastel dragons, napping in mint fields, pocket watches, singing counter melodies with clocks, a ribbon weaving constellations across a courtyard sky. I remind myself to breathe gratitude, then release the day's weight, knowing parchment will remember what I forget. Sleep finally claims consciousness, like a gentle invisibility cloak, drawing edges of awareness inward until only gentle darkness remains, perfumed by honey cake and possibility. Morning greets me with the mellow toll of the distant bell that signals first light for early risers, and I wake to find a strip of apricot sky framed by the dormitory window. The castle is still hushed, breathing its ancient rhythm as fireplaces rest in cooled embers and staircases hold their positions like courteous sentries. I dress quietly, choosing a scarf against the lingering chill that clings to stone corridors before heating charms stir. On my desk, the silver and teal ribbon pulses once, then stills, as if aware the day's chapter is about to unfold. I slip it into an inner pocket, gather parchment and quill, and step into the spiral stair where torch flames lean forward to light my descent, greeting me like old friends who enjoy sharing secrets at dawn. The corridor outside the common room glows with gentle topaz spheres that hover just above the flagstones, a night shift enchantment designed to guide wandering students back to their beds, yet presently escorting me toward the great hall. Portraits along the wall begin to stir, stretching painted limbs, adjusting bonnets, and murmuring polite salutations. One elderly wizard taps his frame with a silver cane, asking for the latest Quidditch scores, and I promise to return later with news. The eagle knocker behind me poses its dawn riddle too to yawning first years, demanding the difference between hope and certainty, and I hear them debating while the castle breath draws me onward. The scent of warm honey and clove drifts from kitchens below, luring my appetite in a gentle tug that quickens my stride. Inside the great hall, the enchanted ceiling reflects a pastel sunrise streaked with feathery clouds, and the high windows are cracked just wide enough to invite crisp air, fragrant with distant pine. The house tables display an early breakfast selection meant for those who favor quiet contemplation over last-minute revision. I pour steaming cocoa laced with cinnamon into a small cup that charms itself warmer with every sip, then choose oatcakes studded with crystallized ginger for a pleasant spark upon the tongue. Across the table sits Professor Babbling, scrolling through runic diagrams that reconfigure with each pass of her quill. She nods, then shares that today she will demonstrate how lattice glyphs reinforce bridge spells, an application that once kept a mountain pass open through 3 consecutive winters. I jot the anecdote, already imagining goblins engraving sigils on keystones against blizzards. Following breakfast, I wander to the courtyard, where dragon-shaped gutters drip yesterday's rain into pools that shimmer with reflections of passing clouds. A cluster of gardeners in moss-colored robes murmurs over an ailing row of moon lilies whose petals have faded from pearl to dull pewter. I kneel to inspect the soil, recalling Sprout's advice about noble drake fertilizer, and suggest a diluted infusion combined with crushed mooncalf eggshell The head gardener raises an impressed brow, promising to trial the concoction. While we converse, a pair of miniature pixies buzz overhead, carrying twigs for an ambitious nest beneath the sundial's bronze gnomon, their high-pitched argument over interior design sounding suspiciously like rival architects disputing window placement. The scene reminds me that even the smallest beings negotiate artistry amid daily tasks. Charms class begins with Professor Flitwick balancing atop a stack of textbooks to illustrate controlled levitation, emphasizing how emotional steadiness stabilizes spell altitude. Today's objective is the oral cloak, a charm that muffles footsteps without silencing speech, originally devised for meta-witches to move quickly through ward corridors at night. Partners pair off, chanting the incantation while tracing a gentle crescent motion. My partner is a bright-eyed Hufflepuff who admits she often trips over her own enthusiasm, a confession delivered with self-deprecating grin. We practice until her steps glide soundlessly, and in triumph she forgets caution, turning too sharply and drifting into a decorative suit of armor that erupts in metallic giggles, revealing Flitwick's hidden laughter charm meant to discourage reckless haste. Everyone claps, delighted by both success and the professor's mischievous lesson. Between lessons, I follow the almanac of unseen roads to an overlooked side corridor where the compass charm tugs insistently northwest. The stone arch narrows into a passage scarcely shoulder wide, walls etched by centuries of footfalls. Dim torches kindle the moment my shoe touches the threshold, revealing mosaics of mythical beasts dancing along the floor tiles. After 20 steps, the compass needle snaps due east, guiding me to a wooden door barely taller than a broom. Carved upon it is a single rune, meaning listen. Inside, I find a compact workshop holding shelves of half-assembled music boxes, each shaped like a different magical creature. Gears tick softly, tiny wings flutter, and I realize the artisan, whoever they are, attempts to record animal calls as clockwork melodies. I wind a phoenix box and listen, amazed, as a warm trill fills the room, echoing through brass hollows. Professor Sinistra's Midday Astronomy lecture relocates to the charms classroom due to intermittent drizzle cloaking rooftop observation decks. She rolls in a celestial projector that floods starlight across vaulted ceilings despite the hour, and the constellation Lupus pads slowly overhead, limbs composed of glittering points. She explains eclipsing binaries, noting that paired stars trapped in mutual orbit influence magical navigation spells which rely on predictable brightness. Students sketch diagrams while she tells a humorous tale of a 17th century navigator who attempted to apparate using a star chart painted by a prankster cousin, materializing instead in the center of a goat pen during market day. The goat pen detail sends a ripple of laughter through the room, and Sinistra reminds us that double-checking coordinates saves laundry bills and dignity in equal measure. Lunch today features leek and potato soup served in cauldrons proportionate to appetite, from thimble-sized for pixies to hearty tureens for hungry prefects. I join a table of Boxbatten's visitors who compare wizarding architecture across Europe, lamenting that some French academies no longer enchant gargoyles to sing warnings before rainfall. One suggests Hogwarts implement seasonal choral gargoyles for festivals, an idea that sparks conversation about mixing artistic and meteorological charms. Over buttered sourdough, I describe the secret music box workshop, and a visiting student reveals her grandmother once fashioned a basilisk-shaped metronome that calmed stage fright before public duels. She agrees that recording Phoenix song in gears could preserve nuance, impossible on parchment. We exchange addresses to share findings, sealing correspondence with the soft clink of goblets. Afternoon Potions finds us in the cool dungeons, where Professor Slughorn has arranged cauldrons in concentric rings, each bubbling with a different shade of turquoise. He announces we will brew Draught of Dreamless Insight, a delicate potion that calms the mind while sharpening memory for 1 hour, prized by scholars during examination season. The procedure begins with soaking valerian in moonlit water, and every pair receives a file marked by last night's exact lunar phase. My partner, the bright-eyed Hufflepuff from Charms, sniffs the liquid and declares it smells like sleepy violets. We add shredded cinnamon bark, counting heartbeats instead of seconds, to teach timing by intuition. Slughorn circles, praising aromatic notes, then warns that impatience yields syrupy nightmares. A Slytherin cauldron thickens too quickly and emits lilac smoke shaped like question marks. Slughorn intervenes with a flick that clears the air and a story about the perils of shortcuts. When our potion settles into opalescent stillness, we decant a sample for inspection. Slughorn peers through a monocle, enchanted to reveal emotional resonance, and smiles when the brew reflects calm ripples rather than jagged lines. He awards 10 points, slipping a toffee onto my partner's desk as informal bonus. Class ends, but I linger, fascinated by shelves of rare ingredients, noticing a dusty jar of ground meteorite labeled "Do not confuse with basil," and another of crystallized kelpie tears said to inspire melancholy melodies. Slughorn sees my interest and recounts how he once hosted a composer who created an entire opera after inhaling kelpie vapor, though ticket sales floundered because audiences felt inexplicably wistful for ponds they had never seen. He advises that creative breakthroughs require caution lest inspiration drown its keeper, advice offered with kindly sparkle and a discreet hint that curiosity remains welcome here under respectful gloves. Leaving the dungeons, I cross paths with Madame Hooch, who gestures toward the courtyard where a row of first-year brooms rest bristles up. She invites me to supervise practice hover drills while she confers with the groundskeeper. The brooms shiver like eager puppies, sensing riders near. I demonstrate proper mounting posture, knees slightly bent, grip relaxed yet firm, and explain that a broom responds to confidence more than raw strength. One anxious student whispers that heights make him dizzy, so I conjure an illusion of gentle fog at ankle level, framing his mind with safety. His broom lifts a cautious foot, then another, and soon he floats a meter above ground, grinning with surprise. The exercise turns into a wobbly parade, laughter echoing against stone walls. When Hooch returns, she applauds the progress, noting that empathy can be as aerodynamic as polish, a compliment that leaves warmth in its wake. Late afternoon brings the elective seminarium of enchanted architecture deep within a round chamber whose domed ceiling resembles a dragon shell. Green glass scales interlocked with leaded veins. Professor Palladio, tall and spare as a compass needle, welcomes us with diagrams of self-repairing corridors projected in silver light. He explains that Hogwarts corridors adjust width according to pedestrian flow, a charm keyed to collective footfall pressure, perfected during a 17th century plague to avoid bottlenecks. We practice sketching living floor plans on parchment that shifts under quill strokes, rooms stretching or shrinking with each imagined purpose. At my table, the design evolves into a library that grows additional alcoves. Whenever readers gather in particular genres, Palladio comments that architecture becomes autobiography when allowed to dream, encouraging us to listen for stone sighs that reveal longing for windows, or relief when burdens ease. Dinner arrives amid golden chandeliers that drop fragrant sparks, dissolving before they reach table height, purely for spectacle. The menu offers rosemary roasted root vegetables shaped into miniature towers, salmon glazed with juniper honey, and a salad of moon lily petals revived since morning by Sprout's fertilizer experiment. The petals shimmer with faint song, a success evidenced by soft harmonic chords that accompany bites. I join the Volksbatten's delegation again, sharing progress on the music boxes. One student suggests embedding memory threads to let each box recall a listener's happiest sound, creating bespoke lullabies. We brainstorm ethical safeguards, concluding that joy stored should dissipate after comfort, never trap emotions like insects in amber. The discussion feels half banquet, half symposium, warmed by claret that refills itself to maintain cordial mood. Over dessert, star-shaped pastries dusted with vanilla snow. Talk shifts to tomorrow's dueling club exhibition. Twilight deepens and castle corridors glow with lanterns nested inside crystal shells. I decide to revisit the hidden workshop, guided by the compass whose needle now traces a steady beat matching my footsteps. Inside, new boxes await, their gears silent but lids engraved with runes spelling. Welcome back. I wind a unicorn-shaped box and hear a melody reminiscent of dew falling on thyme leaves, delicate and fresh. A parchment slip emerges from a slot. Reading record your favorite sound. After reflection, I whisper the hush of falling snow broken by distant laughter. The box clicks, storing the memory, then plays a faint echo, gifting the sensation back like gently folded cloth. I leave a note thanking the artisan, signing simply observer, and sense contentment in the soft hush that follows, as though the room itself nods approval. Night rounds the castle with cool breath, drawing students toward dormitories. Yet my compass nudges me one last time to the astronomy tower. Sinistra stands alone, adjusting a lens that refracts moonlight into cascading prisms along the parapet. She invites me to look, revealing a lunar halo forecast of mild auroras, a rare treat this far south. We watch faint curtains of green ripple on the horizon, silent and slow, like ocean tides captured in sky glass. I remark that some Muggle legends say auroras are bridges for souls, and she replies that every culture paints light with its deepest hopes. We share quiet until the tower clock rings midnight. As I descend spiral stairs, ribbons snug in pocket, I reflect on a day layered with potion vapors, architectural dreams, broom-born courage, and music coaxed from wood and memory. Reaching my room, I write until quill slips from sleepy fingers, then surrender to slumber content that the wizard world still holds, more wonders than any fair tale dared promise. Dawn slips into the dormitory, like a careful librarian beginning her rounds, fingertips of cool light tapping along the stone sill and rustling the drapes. I rise before the alarm finches can assemble their choir, savoring the hush that comes when castle and occupants share a single long breath. Outside the window, the storm of yesterday has polished every roof tile until they shine like dragon scales, and wisps of steam drift upward from warm chimneys into air still laced with dew. I dress and notice the silver teal ribbon resting beside my journal, faint glow stilled as though gathering strength for whatever riddles time intends to pose today. The compass charm flutters once, then steadies north, a silent promise of direction. With quill, parchment, and a pocket square of storm-risen brioche, saved from last night, I step into the stairwell where torches brighten in greeting, eager to escort another expedition into waking magic. Corridors ring softly with echoes of distant kitchens, pans clinking like cheerful bells, while house elves craft breakfast symphonies. Portraits yawn themselves to life, stretching paint-stiff limbs and commenting on the fine weather. If dry thunder can count as weather, a cavalier in one frame polishes his plume, announcing that today feels ripe for chivalry, while an abbess in the next suggests humility pairs better with porridge. I nod, absorbing small philosophies, and continue toward the great hall where the enchanted ceiling mirrors a sky rinsed clean, sun edging over the forbidden forest in burnt apricot hues. At Ravenclaw table, I find Professor Babbling balancing a stack of rune tablets, their carved symbols rearranging in playful spirals. She pours 2 cups of nettle tea, the color of emerald glass, and tells me she dreamt of talking gargoyles, debating punctuation, which must, she insists, portend a linguistic puzzle hidden somewhere on the 7th floor. I promise to keep eyes open. Breakfast menu favors hearty fare after the excitement of wounded griffins. So platters hold thick slices of oat bread, poached eggs nested in crescents of smoked trout, and jars of cloudberry preserve glowing like citrine gems. I spread a generous spoonful across toast, marveling at the way the preserve twinkles under hall candles, and recall yesterday's storm yeast lesson. A first year joins, eyes wide with tales of merfolk lullabies, drifting through her open window at midnight, too faint for older students to notice. She hums an echo, thin but clear, and I transcribe the motif onto parchment before it fades from memory. Babbling leans over, intrigued, and wonders if the melody might correspond to ancient water runes known to bloom only after tempests. She invites us both to her office later, promising a tuning fork that can reveal harmonic sigils hidden in song, a potential breakthrough bridging music and script. The morning timetables list care of magical creatures first, and the path to Hagrid's cabin feels different. Earth faintly spongy from overnight rain, releasing scents of cedar, peat, and something tangy that might be unicorn thyme sprouting among grasses. Kettleburn stands near a paddock gate, freshly mended, though scorch marks reveal a student's nocturnal fire-making misadventure, quickly smothered by enchanted rain barrel. Today, he introduces runabeasts, small quadrupeds, whose stone-like hides bear glowing glyphs that shift with the creature's emotions. They resemble mischievous gargoyle puppies, tails flicking sparks each time they sense curiosity. We are tasked to sketch the glyphs as they appear, a lesson in observing living language. My runabeast shows a swirling pattern of nested circles that pulse when I praise its ear tufts, then flatten when a Slytherin's quill scratches too loudly. I note the change, theorizing that the circles translate to calm, layered within interest. We break at mid-morning, and I detour to Greenhouse 3, where Professor Sprout tends flutterby bushes, now blooming in pastel chords of sound. Proof that noble drake, fertilizer, and mooncalf eggshell form a symphony of horticulture. She hands me a leaf shimmering aquamarine and asks me to listen. Holding it near my ear, I hear a chord akin to the merfolk lullaby, yet pitched higher, like sunlight captured in glass. Sprout beams, explaining plants, often eavesdrop on ambient magic, weaving echoes into their own voices. She suggests presenting the leaf to Babbling's tuning fork, an elegant convergence of botany and rune. Before leaving, I help repot a snargaluth sapling, its tendrils sluggish from storm hangover, and Sprout rewards me with a jar of dew-infused soil, said to amplify clarity of thought when kept near parchment. I tuck it carefully into my satchel beside the ribbon and compass. Next comes History of Magic, where Professor Binns, infinitely calm, floats beside chalkboard lines, discussing goblin mint reforms. Yet something sparks when I whisper merfolk motifs to the Cloudberry first year sitting next to me. She sketches wave symbols along margin, each one pulsing faint blue, and Binns pauses, intrigued by living ink long enough to assign extra credit exploration of aquatic scripts. Even the ghost enjoys novelty. He shares forgotten treaty details about water-dwelling factions and land bureaucrats debating shell tax values. His tonal shift from monotone to near enthusiasm, remarkable. I transcribe every word, sensing future puzzle pieces, knitting. The class ends with students blinking awake, but carrying faint excitement, murmuring about songs hidden beneath the lake, like pearls inside oysters of silence. Lunch spreads warmth through hallways as cauldrons of mushroom barley stew arrive, steam curling into little dancing runabeasts above each bowl before dissipating. I dine with the Boxbatons delegation again, comparing notes on living glyphskins and discussing possible kinship between runabeasts and gargoyle lineage. One scholar posits that castles might shed young runabeasts the way trees drop seeds, an idea that delights me so much I nearly drop bread into stew. We plot an afternoon excursion to trace stone residue near parapets, theorizing we might find miniature footprints made of powdered granite. Over lemon pepper biscuits we finalize plan, mindful to avoid Filch's cleaning schedule. Before parting ways, I share a sample of Sprout's dew soil and watch as the visiting scholar's eyes widen at its fragrance, promising to test it in Boxbaton's greenhouse for comparative botanical research. After lunch, Babbling's office glows with scented candles shaped like quills, wax dripping fragrant lavender. She produces the promised tuning fork of meteoric iron streaked with copper veins. When struck gently on her rune-etched desk, the fork emits a shimmering tone that paints lilac sigils in the air before our eyes. I hold the flutterbee leaf near the vibration, and the glyphs ripple, coalescing into an elongated S-curve resembling a river path. Then I hum the merfolk fragment, and the S-curve mirrors itself, forming a symbol of reflection, perhaps bridging surface and depth. Babbling claps like a delighted sparrow, declaring we have stumbled upon a lexicon of aquatic harmony. She tasks us with gathering more melodies at varying depths, though warns us to respect Selkie lull laws governing ownership of ocean songs. The first year looks simultaneously awed and alarmed, yet eager to dive into music, no book yet records. Afternoon light angles through stained glass stairwell windows, splashing kaleidoscopes across suits of armor which bow as we pass. Our rooftop parapet inspection yields handfuls of tiny claw marks etched in stone dust, undeniable evidence that runabeast pups scramble here under moonlight. The Boxbaton scholar photographs the tracks with a camera obscura that seals images onto silver leaf, and we plan to overlay glyph sketches in hopes of finding linguistic nests, perhaps sentences scrawled through nocturnal play. A sudden breeze lifts one silver sheet into the air, and it flutters down to courtyard, where Filch's cat snatches it. But after brief chase and polite negotiation involving a conjured tuna fillet, the sheet is returned, slightly dented, yet intact, a small example of diplomacy across species. Evening assembles itself in copper and violet, and Professor Flitwick hosts a recital for students experimenting with oral cloak charm. accompanied by enchanted instruments that play only when listeners breathe in unison. The hall darkens, stars replicating overhead, and the music begins as faint heartbeat percussion, softened by cloaked footsteps weaving through. I recognize the merfolk melody woven into theme, augmented by flutterbee leaf harmonies, and feel hairs lift at the nape. Audience members close eyes, guided by sound toward visions of shifting water and luminous sand. As finale peaks, the silver teal ribbon in my pocket pulses thrice, then falls still, as though acknowledging resonance between stories of sea and sky. Thunder rumbles far off again, gentle this time, like applause from clouds. When candles brighten the room seems subtly larger, perhaps walls expanded to hold new echoes. The recital ends, yet curiosity keeps feet from pointing toward bed. So I drift through corridors, lit by wall lamps that dim politely as I pass, their flames bowing in little arcs of orange. The silver teal ribbon in my pocket tingles, drawing attention to a faint trail of glowing footprints. Surely a prank left by older Ravenclaws testing stealth charms. I follow the prints until they fade beside the library doors, where a hush as deep as lake water waits. Inside, stacks loom like dusk-lit canyons, scented of vellum and lavender polish, and Madame Pants nods, once, recognizing a restless researcher, even at late hour. I settle at a table beneath the soaring dome and unroll parchment, eager to cross-reference runebeast glyphs with gargoyle inscriptions. Turning pages as quietly as falling feathers, I discover a 15th century marginal note claiming certain castles hatch stone familiars during electrical storms, an idea that nudges the mind like a whisper too bright to ignore. While I copy the note, a gravelly voice from overhead inquires whether my quill needs sharper claws, and I look up to find the portrait of Master Stonemason Elias Churt perched on a frame ledge, beard dusted with what appears to be everlasting mortar. He peers down with eyes of polished granite, then invites me to recite the glyph I sketched on the runebeast earlier. I oblige, tracing circles in the air. Elias grunts approval, explaining the pattern translates to settled curiosity, a comfort state for young constructs, and he reveals that gargoyles sometimes carve these very circles into their roosts to lull restless joints. Before I can ask more, a soft whoosh rushes through the aisle, and the candle flames turn blue, heralding Peeves arriving upside down, whirling dust motes into glitter storms. The poltergeist snatches my copied note, declaring secret stonemason lore, ripe for treasure hunts, then darts toward a forbidden staircase with taunting cackle. Rather than shout and earn Pince's wrath, I give silent chase, up narrow steps, spiraling through forgotten turrets where cobwebs lace banisters like silver embroidery. Peeves pauses at a trapdoor, grins, and flips the note back, satisfied with the thrill delivered, then phases through ceiling stones in search of louder amusement. Above, the attic chamber smells of stardust and cedar. Crates marked astronomy equipment only sit beside glass orbs that pulse with captured comet light, each orb humming faint harmonics. One has cracked, releasing glowing particles that drift like lazy fireflies. I record the pitch, suspecting resonance with the tuning fork. Suddenly, the compass charm spins, then freezes, pointing west, where a slit window frames the lake, glowing under half-moon. Remembering the merfolk melody, I hum softly, and comet motes gather into wavering rune that twinkles, perhaps granting blessing for unknown journey. I pocket a single mote, sealed in vial, promise careful study, then descend. Clock chimes, 1:45 to midnight, yet the mind refuses rest. So I rendezvous with the Cloudberry first year and the Boakspatten scholar at the boathouse. Lanterns swaying in peppery breeze. Oars dip without sound as we glide onto calm water. Its surface mirror bright, except where reeds whisper secrets. Halfway across, ripples radiate and luminous shapes bloom beneath. Kelpie illusions shaped from moonlight and mist. They prance along the wake, eyes gleaming emerald, manes trailing sparks. The scholar murmurs in French that Kelpies test courage through beauty, advice echoing old folklore. I sit still, offer respectful nod, and place the cracked comet mote on palm. The illusions swirl closer, then disperse in lilac vapor, leaving water serene once more, an acknowledgement that curiosity paired with reverence satisfies even fickle lake spirits. We breathe relief, spiced with exhilaration, recording every detail on waterproof scrap parchment before returning to shore. Feet barely touch dock planks when to merfolk's surface, scales reflecting starlight like shifting mosaics. One bears a conch inscribed with fluid runes. The other carries woven kelp basket, heavy with smooth stones that glow seawater blue. They speak in musical clicks and low thrums, yet the tune resonates with the lullaby motif. I present the jar of Storm East starter as token of gratitude, explaining through gestures and notes that land bread gains song inside crust. The merfolk exchange surprised glances, then hand over the conch, indicating it stores tide cycles in audible form. When placed to ear, I hear deep pulses aligned with moon phases, a metronome for ocean hearts. We bow, thanking them, and they slip beneath waves, leaving comet reflections swaying on ripples. Back on damp dock, would we commit the encounter to ink, humor lacing our voices as we ponder whether bread can now keep time like a drummer. Castle doors accept our late return without creak, perhaps approving of exchanges rooted in kindness rather than theft. Corridors rest under faint starlight from charmed windows, and staircase 12 cooperatively waits in normal position, a courtesy rare after midnight. At dormitory entrance, the eagle knocker drowsily asks, "What binds silence and song?" And I answer, listening, earning immediate entry. In room, classmates dream under canopies, while moonlight strokes floorboards in soft silver lines. I place the tide conch beside dujar, ribbon, and compass, forming a tableau of today's discoveries. Then note every event in journal, quill moving until eyelids sag. Total words, 4-day approach, expected ledger, yet feel weightless. Proof that wonder expands pages to hold itself. As candle gutter falls into final glow, I whisper, promise to follow tomorrow, wherever runes, ribbons, and restless stone pups might lead, then drift into sleep, scented with sea salt and stardust. Sunrise arrives on tiptoe through stained glass, scattering rubies and sapphires across dormitory walls, while the bell in the north tower sends a single resonant note drifting over pillows. I sit up and listen to the hush that follows, noticing an unfamiliar scent like pine mixed with warm parchment. On my bedside table, the tide conch pulses, releasing gentle bass tones that mark the shift between high and falling water. The silver teal ribbon, delighted by the music, flickers in rhythm, and the compass charm now points straight toward the open window, suggesting there is news blowing in from the forest beyond the lake. I pocket all 3 items, slip-on boots, polished by helpful house elves, while I slept, and make my way toward the stairwell, where torches lean forward, eager to illuminate a day no scroll has yet described. At the foot of the stairs, I find a cluster of barn owls perched on the banister, each holding tiny envelopes sealed with wax that bears the crest of the Department of Mysteries. One owl flutters onto my shoulder, drops its parcel, then waits expectantly for thanks. Inside the envelope lies a vellum card printed in shimmering ink, inviting me to a midday symposium on the ethics of memory harvesting, a topic that feels both thrilling and slightly ominous. Beside the invitation rests a brass token shaped like an hourglass, whose sand flows upward, marking admission credentials. The owls depart in perfect formation, wings brushing lamp smoke into delicate spirals, and I tuck the token beside the compass, wondering how many unspoken stories swirl inside harvested memories, and whether songs can survive removal from the mind that first hummed them. Breakfast hums with quiet anticipation, students exchanging theories about the upcoming symposium, which apparently occurs only once a decade when Comet Altamar swings near the planet, energizing time-related charms. Bacon sizzles on silver platters, charmed to maintain crispness, and pumpkin juice sparkles with stray flecks of stardust, the elves added for celebratory flair. I sit beside Professor Vector, who scribbles new equations on a napkin, trying to predict gravitational anomalies during the comet pass. She shares that Altamar briefly strengthens predictive algorithms, allowing glimpses 2 minutes into possible futures, useful for correcting navigation spells, but alarming for gamblers. I laugh, picturing Peeves at the betting boards, and promise to report any mischievous temporal side effects. Nearby, the Cloudberry first-year practices humming water runes into oatmeal, producing a pleasing ripple pattern that garners approving nods from babbling. Transfiguration begins in the sun-drenched atrium, where Professor McGonagall has arranged an assortment of mirrors facing one another, creating a corridor of infinite reflections. Today's lesson explores Mirror Walk, a branch exercise meant only for advanced students, but she allows observers. She demonstrates by stepping into her own reflection and re-emerging to mirrors down, explaining that distance inside mirrored space is governed by personal confidence rather than metric measurement. A Gryffindor attempts the walk, emerges upside down, and laughs, while McGonagall rotates the mirror frame 90 degrees to correct her orientation. I note that this form of travel could lace corridors without staircases, and wonder if runabeasts use reflective puddles on moonlit roofs for similar jumps. The professor catches my thoughtful stare and warns that curiosity inside mirrors can find truths one might prefer to leave backward. Mid-morning clouds roll across the grounds, sending mottled shadows racing over lawns, perfect cover for a surprise visit from Firenze, the centaur astronomer. He invites a small group to the edge of the forbidden forest, where dew sparkles on spider threads like linked constellations. Firenze points to hoofprints, glowing faint silver, evidence of nocturnal passage by a unicorn mare guiding her foal toward hidden glades. He teaches that unicorns donate slivers of moonlight to saplings, speeding growth of yew trees destined to become future wands. We follow the trail until it stops at a ring of mushrooms humming in low harmonic bass. Firenze listens, translates that the fungi record gratitude in song, then bows deeply, signaling class dismissed. As we depart, he hands me a shard of shed unicorn hoof, no larger than a fingernail, instructing that it be placed within the tide conch during next waxing moon to reveal seeds of forgotten constellations. The symposium convenes in the old observatory, its glass dome magnifying daylight into warm honey beams across marble floors. Wizards and witches in robes sewn with glyphs of hourglasses and clocks occupy semicircles of tiered seats, murmuring greetings that sound like pages turning. Madame Penelagon opens proceedings by levitating a vial containing swirling violet mist. Explaining it holds the memory of an inventor's first spark of inspiration. She asks whether such fragments should belong to archives or to descendants, and the debate begins. Vector cites predictive formulae, babbling advocates for cultural fonts. A stern, unspeakable warns of weaponizing nostalgia. I raise a hand, share merfolk experiences with song as living memory, suggesting that extraction must preserve context or else risk silencing a continuum of chorus. My words prompt nods and a footnote in the minutes. Then the brass token warms, indicating breakout discussions pending. Luncheon during recess surprises, with levitating trays carrying bite-sized pies that rotate to display labels of flavor and origin, each sourced from culinary memories donated by delighted volunteers. I sample one called Grandmother's Orchard on first frost, tasting tart apple layered with faint smoke of cedar hearth. For balance, I try Luna over lavender marsh, a savory tart infused with hints of night air and cricket song. While chewing, I notice the silver teal ribbon unfurling from my pocket, drifting toward a wall inset with mosaic that depicts Altamar streaking across stylized sky. The ribbon's glow intensifies, illuminating a hidden latch that reveals a narrow balcony overlooking the courtyard. A cool draft carries whispers of overlapping voices, perhaps stray memories seeking return, and I jot the phenomena, suspecting the comet amplifies even humble pockets of enchantment, like pieces of cloth touched by time. Afternoon sessions move into smaller salons. I join a circle tasked with designing ethical frameworks for shared memory libraries, guided by enchanted parchment that lists principles in real time as we propose them. A Ravenclaw 7th year suggests memories older than 1 century default to public domain unless bound by oath. Another counters that emotion intensity must also guide access. I contribute that any memory carrying unique song or sensory signature belongs partly to all who can hear its resonance, referencing the flutterbee leaf and merfolk chord as precedent. The parchment underlines this in gold, marking it for plenary vote. As session ends, Penelagon hands me a crystal stylus, saying it records only future events, never the past, and she asks me to keep notes tonight to measure comet influence on unfolding decisions. Crystal tucked safely, I exit observatory into air electric with expectation, feeling the day yet halfway written and full of pages begging ink. Sprout appears, holding a watering can, enchanted to dispense rain from last full moon. And together we feed the plants while discussing the ethics of sentient vegetation, overhearing private musings. She decides to braid ribbons of illusion around the ferns that shift recorded words into pure melody, protecting secrets while enhancing greenhouse ambience. The prismatic quill captures this melody as faint pastel streaks across parchment, invisible unless viewed with peripheral sight, perhaps proof that some knowledge prefers indirect approach. Leaving the greenhouse, I follow gravel paths toward the boathouse, lantern in hand, casting golden pockets of warmth over reeds whispering along shore. The lake is calm, moon mirrored crisp upon its surface like a polished silver coin. I remove the crystal stylus and set it upon a flat rock where it absorbs moonlight, then sketches faint astral lines into empty space above, drawing constellations unseen in current skies. The water below answers with gentle ripples forming matching patterns in reflection, suggesting the future constellations. Firenze, revealed, seek anchorage in present memory. A lone grindolo breaks surface briefly, blinking curious amber eyes at the unfamiliar display, then sinks back to depths, leaving a single bubble that pops in soft applause. The compass at my belt twitching toward water signifies new paths might one day traverse currents rather than corridors. Adventurous thought for scholars content with parchment, but tantalizing all the same. Returning indoors, I find Peeves floating near a bright tapestry of heliopaths, gleefully rearranging depiction of fire spirits into a conga line. He spots the silver ribbon on my coat, declares it fancy spaghetti, and tries to tug, only to yelp when gentle spark passes from ribbon to his ethereal fingers. He apologizes, rare moment, then darts off humming Comet Lullaby in off-key kazoo tone. The tapestry spirits, amused, resume original pose but retain new grin, small reminder that mischief sometimes leaves improvements in its wake. As I climb Ravenclaw Tower, each step resonates with subtle echo, perhaps leftover from echo casting demonstration, now bound into stairwell by stone resonance. The eagle knocker is dozing, yet rouses enough to ask, what door never opens, yet always welcomes? And I answer, imagination, earning a sleepy nod and passage into common room, scented of wood smoke and lemon beeswax polish. At the dormitory desk, I arrange discoveries. Tide conch now holding lull moonlight, unicorn shard, quiescent yet faintly radiant, crystal stylus loaded with future constellations, prismatic quill still shimmering with sprite gift, aurora bread parcel intact despite earlier temptations. Journal pages turn themselves to blank spread, ready to receive fresh ink. I write until candle nears base, recounting echo-casting advances, mirrored conservatories tonal water, rootling dialogues, and room of requirement prophecy. Words flow like soft rain, punctuation set by quill flicker, each paragraph sinking into parchment with gentle certainty. When final period settles, ribbon unwinds, circling journal as ribbon tie, sealing stories until morning revision. I extinguish flame, slide beneath blankets, fragrant with fern perfume and cedar, and feel castle breathe around me, stone heart beating slow lullaby. Sleep enfolds senses, carrying echoes of glass bowls, chiming across inner sky, where future stars already practice their brilliant waltz for watchers yet unborn.